Imagine holding a weapon so lethal it could break an empire, not a nuclear warhead, not a cyber weapon, just a telephone, a flashing computer screen, and a staggering amount of audacity. For 3 centuries, the Bank of England stood as an impregnable fortress of global finance. It had survived world wars, economic depressions, and the collapse of its own physical empire. Yet, on a rainy autumn morning in 1992, this ancient institution was brought to its knees, not by an invading army, but by a single man. A man sitting in a quiet office in New York, whispering a few short words into a telephone receiver. By the time the sun set, this man had extracted $1 billion in cold, hard profit from the British taxpayers. He had humiliated a superpower, forced a government into chaotic submission, and forever altered the course of European history. His name was George Soros, and this is the story of how he executed the ultimate financial heist, not by breaking the law, but by exposing a lie. But to understand how he did it, we have to look at the trap the British government set for itself. A trap born of pride, politics, and a fatal illusion of control. Let us go back to the late 1980s. The Cold War is ending, and Europe is dreaming of a grand, unified future. To achieve this, European leaders created a system called the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, or the ERM. The idea was simple, yet dangerously idealistic. To prepare for a single currency, European nations agreed to link their exchange rates together. They would peg their currencies to each other, with the mighty German Deutschmark acting as the anchor. Think of it like a fleet of ships tied together by heavy steel chains. If the sea is calm, the fleet is incredibly stable. But if a massive storm hits and one ship begins to sink, those chains won't save it. They will pull the entire fleet down. In 1990, Britain, desperate to curb inflation and maintain its status as a global leader, decided to tie its ship to the German anchor. They joined the ERM. The British public was told this was the path to stability. But behind the polished press conferences, a ticking time bomb had just been set. The storm arrived sooner than anyone expected. It came in the form of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Germany reunified. It was a beautiful historical moment, but it came with a colossal economic price tag. Germany had to spend massive amounts of money to rebuild the East. To prevent its economy from overheating and to curb inflation, the German central bank, the Bundesbank, did what any central bank would do. They raised interest rates. High interest rates attract foreign capital, making the Deutschmark incredibly strong. But for Britain, this was a disaster. The British economy was already sliding into a deep recession. Unemployment was rising, businesses were failing, and the housing market was collapsing. Normally, to cure a recession, a country wants to lower interest rates to encourage borrowing and spending. But because Britain was tied to the German anchor through the ERM, they couldn't do that. Under the rules of the system, they had to keep their interest rates high to match Germany. If they didn't, investors would sell their pounds to buy Deutschmarks, and the pound's value would crash below the agreed limit. Britain was trapped in an economic vice. To save their currency, they had to suffocate their own people. Every day the pressure grew. The British government insisted everything was fine. They promised they would never leave the ERM. They swore the pound was strong. But in finance, as in life, when a government screams that everything is fine, the smartest people in the room start looking for the exit. In a high-rise office in New York, George Soros was watching. Soros was not a typical investor. He didn't just look at numbers on a screen, he looked at human psychology. He believed in a theory he called reflexivity, the idea that people's biases and actions shape reality, creating feedback loops that can lead to massive market distortions. He looked at Great Britain and saw a country living a lie. He knew the British government was bluffing. They couldn't keep interest rates high forever while their citizens lost their homes. The political pressure would eventually break them. The pound was overvalued, locked in a room it didn't belong in, and the door was about to be kicked down. Soros realized that if he bet against the pound, and if he could convince others to do the same, the British government would run out of money trying to defend it. But this wasn't a risk-free gamble. If the Bank of England held its ground, Soros could lose everything. It was a game of high-stakes poker where the opponent had the printing presses of an entire nation. Yet Soros didn't hesitate. He didn't just place a bet. He decided to break the bank. He quietly began building a massive short position. He borrowed billions of British pounds and immediately sold them, converting them into German marks and French francs. But he knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed a wolf pack. He began leaking his thesis to other major hedge funds and banks. The whisper spread through the global financial markets. The British pound is weak. The British government is lying. It's time to strike. The date was September 15th, 1992, the eve of the battle. Soros called his chief strategist, Stanley Druckenmiller. Druckenmiller explained that they had already built a position of about $1.5 billion against the pound. He suggested they slowly increase it. Soros looked at him and said words that would go down in financial history. Go for the jugular. Soros didn't want to slowly increase the pressure. He wanted to unleash a tidal wave. By the next morning, his fund had leveraged its position to an astronomical $10 billion. September 16th, 1992, Black Wednesday. At 8:30 a.m., the London markets opened, and a financial hurricane made landfall. A wall of sell orders hit the market. Billions of pounds were being dumped every minute. The Bank of England was forced to step in. To maintain the pound's value, they had to buy every single pound that was being sold. They used their foreign currency reserves, buying billions of pounds with their precious dollars and marks. But it was like trying to stop a volcanic eruption with a bucket of water. No matter how many pounds they bought, more kept flooding the market. By 11 a.m., the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Norman Lamont, was in a state of sheer panic. He called the Prime Minister. They had to take drastic measures. The government announced an emergency interest rate hike. They raised rates from 10% to 12%. In normal times, a 2% rate hike is shocking, but the market barely flinched. The selling continued. At 2:15 p.m., Lamont did the unthinkable. He raised interest rates again, to an unprecedented 15%. It was an act of absolute desperation. A 15% interest rate would destroy British businesses and bankrupt millions of homeowners. It was the financial equivalent of burning down your own house just to keep warm. And still, the market didn't care. Soros and his wolf pack knew the British government was out of ammunition. The rate hike was a sign of weakness, not strength. It was the thrashing of a dying giant. By 7:40 p.m., the battle was over. Norman Lamont stepped in front of the cameras. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. He announced that Great Britain was suspending its membership in the ERM. They were letting the pound float. The chain had broken. The pound collapsed, losing 15% of its value in a matter of hours. In his New York office, George Soros quietly closed his book. In a single day of trading, he had made over $1 billion in profit. The day became known as Black Wednesday. For the British government, it was a national humiliation. Taxpayers paid the price for a political elite that refused to face reality. But for the markets, it was a paradigm shift. It proved that in the modern global economy, no government, no matter how powerful, is stronger than the market. Central banks, with all their gold and prestige, are ultimately just players in a game they do not control. Soros was labeled the man who broke the Bank of England. Some saw him as a financial pirate, a parasite who preyed on the weakness of a nation. Others saw him as a realist, a man who simply pointed out that the emperor had no clothes. But the true lesson of Black Wednesday goes deeper than a single trade. It reveals a fundamental truth about the systems we build. We build massive, complex institutions and pretend they are permanent. We trust in currencies, banks, and governments as if they are laws of nature. But they are not. They are fragile constructs built entirely on a single invisible foundation: belief. And when that belief vanishes, the illusion shatters. The next time you look at a bank, a currency, or a system that seems too big to fail, remember September 16th, 1992. Remember that all it takes is one crack in the wall and one man with the courage to strike. If you found this story fascinating, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the shadows of history. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the true power of global finance and leave a comment below. Was George Soros a financial genius who exposed a broken system, or a predator who exploited a nation? Let us know what you think.